So a little explanation before you head into this. I'm so sorry, I had to re-explain this because my camera's just like all over the place and I'm all over the place. I'm so sorry for this. It's so long, it doesn't need to be this long. And for the most part I talked to you about things you probably already knew or just had no care for even hearing about because it's like duh. Duh, why? Why? Yes, why talk to me like I'm an alien from another planet? I'm so sorry, but that's just the way it is. It's just a ramble. Have fun if you want to, and just leave if you don't. We'll go to the video now. Okay, so relationships is kind of a fun word because it's like one of the most construed words I think there kind of is. Relationship is with anything. I mean, like an atom to an atom, like element to element, inanimate object to an inanimate object, me to a couch, me, like all kinds of relationships everywhere. It's everything. And one of probably where the word is most construed is with people. Kind of like people are the only kind of relationships. But even more construed even within that is the romantic relationships. Which has been, I mean, like, it's dictated in media and just pressure and just everything. Like, we always hear about romantic relationships, but never really, like, the relationships of just you crossing the street next to another person. I mean, that's a relationship. What we have dictated on that is just like we have like a formula for passing somebody on the street. If they come your way, probably not going to say anything, but if you smile, they're probably going to smile back. It's just kind of courtesy and etiquette and what we've always been taught. Which is like, I say that and it kind of sounds like a bad thing, like, oh, we're just programmed to say all these stupid things. But really, I mean, that's kind of cool because we have structure and we're a working society. It's not all like chaos and craziness. So, those are kind of just like relationships just in general. For people relationships, I mean, there's like that person you just won't probably ever see again. You pass them on the street, goodbye. And then we've got the other sense where, I mean, it's like extremely either intimate or romantic. It doesn't have to be like romantic, just extremely intimate, which could be like family or romantic or friends. Those are the kind of the big three that I think I'm going to talk about mostly. Is kind of like family, friends, and then romantic relationships. Which will be the ones I'm going to speak about. And they're going to be the most intimate relationships you face. Much more than like co-workers or peers or just anybody else, but I love, there's so many cool different relationships with just so many different types of people, and I mean, there's relationships for like age and all that kind of stuff, age, intelligence, all kinds of different things, or like talents, just relationships everywhere. But I'm just gonna talk mostly about those three, gonna be most intimate with just purely people. With those particular ones, and actually just the two of the friends and the romantic relationships, I'd say personally I'm much more drawn to, I'd say there's kind of two, if we're going on a 2D world here, at some point you kind of see there's kind of this factor of just kind of people who are on the same wavelength, and then people who have similar interests or the same interests. And I think we focus way more heavily on that now as a society. We're kind of just more like, oh, do you like the same things I do? And so that's a term for me to like you, or that sort of thing. Which I don't think it isn't. It's just not one that I personally use as much. I'm much more geared towards, like, do we think along the same lines? Is there kind of like a bond or kind of that thing that's just not really said. It doesn't have to be said for it to just kind of be there, and you know that there's kind of a chemistry between the two. That's something I've always been more interested in. And so, with that, like, I guess, too, those are relationships that I've found to be the most working and longest relationships I've had. Has been with people who are just more on a similar wavelength. And with those people, though, for the most part, I've also faced that we don't have a lot of similar interests. There are definitely some few, like, relationships, but then there aren't, and so that can kind of cause a rift, but not nearly as much as I faced with people who have the same interests as me, but then we don't have the chemistry, and that to me just makes it a lot, those relationships have always been a lot harder. But luckily, I mean, it's not a 2D world, it doesn't have to be just this black and white, because relationships will always be whatever both parties want to give and take out of it. If you're both giving and taking 50, and they're giving and taking 50, it's going to be a good working relationship, and you're willing to keep it at that 50-50 giving and taking for both parties, then it's going to be a great relationship. No matter what your likes, no matter what your interests, no matter if you have good chemistry, no matter if you have great chemistry. And that's what'll always be the determining factor for those two. What I like most about relationships are something I've dealt with a lot, because most of the time, I mean, I could really argue this for any sort of other extracurricular activity, anything you do. I mean, I could argue the fact of you knowing some sort of relationship about it. But one of the things that I've worked on most, and which has a really heavy focus on it, would be acting. And it's one of the coolest things. I mean, you have to think about your relationship to just anything that's on the stage. First of all, like anything inanimate, the stage itself, you have to have a chemistry with it, or a certain amount of like relationship that you have to have in order for you to sell the space. As a working space, you have to give off this relationship, and it's one of the coolest things. And not to mention that, I mean, then you get to have all the actors and stuff like that, and you get to make up whichever relationships are set in the script, which aren't something that you might naturally come by, which is, I just think it's really cool. And it's really fun to get to exercise all those sorts of different relationships, but at that point too, I mean, it causes you to think a lot, like, about the relationships, and they're questions that come up that don't get asked to you in any other sort of sense, because, I mean, they're intimate questions that you never really kind of ask. And that's why acting's so, like, interesting and really kind of hard to deal with sometimes, especially for some other people, because you have to understand why you're doing things, or why your relationships work, or what works with them. They are important questions to ask yourself, and ask, like, what's going on. Like, I think it's always important to ask kind of like, why does this relationship work? Why do things work the way they do? And I think for me, it's kind of been separated in those two kind of categories of just people I've just been on the same wavelength with, and then people I just have similar interests with. Been talking mostly about, like, the good of relationships as well, like, speaking of it, like, good, I mean, there's also a whole lot of, like, other parts of relationship doesn't mean, like, a good relationship. I mean, it can mean bad as well. It's just a thing, like, it's whatever. It's all of it. Bad relationships, I've seen more than I'd like to, and where there's disconnect and discord and that sort of thing. And I don't like those ones as much. But it is important to ask yourself why. Because, like, there can be certain times, like, I think, when it's very important to ask is, like, do you not like somebody because of something, like, if you're just not at, like, the same wavelength of each other, I mean, that's not a good reason not to really like somebody. Like, yes, it's gonna happen. There's gonna be a person like that you're just not connected with at all. Like, you just don't understand. But that doesn't mean they're a bad person. That doesn't mean, like, you have to be, like, you have to hate them. You don't, like, just because of that, you're gonna have to work a whole lot harder with that relationship, but you can turn it into whatever kind of relationship you'd like. And if you just want to leave it there, you can. Which is completely fine as well. That's, for the most part, in a relationship. What's cool about relationships, or I mean particularly in ones that you're going to be intimate with, so I'm talking more for friends and romantic relationships, you can pick anybody and it's going to work out as well as it can depending upon if you're both giving 50-50. That will determine a good relationship, whether you have connect or not. Which is, it's kind of cool. Love turns that on its head, and it can do whatever it wants. But I mean, you have to be willing to work. And for the most part, I don't feel it should be that hard. I guess here's where I'll get a little bit more personal now. But what's most important in a relationship is having a good, like, push and pull, and just for any good and or intimate relationship, one of the most important things is the amount of push and pull and give and take you're gonna put into the relationship. And I feel that it should be, if you want to be in an intimate kind of romantic relationship, it shouldn't have to be that difficult to, in order for it to be a good push and pull. It shouldn't, like, I feel like probably one of the best relationships you'll find will be somebody you're very connected with and also have a very, very similar interest with. It's very hard to come by, you don't come by them often. And one of my favorite examples of a relationship, I think, like, to be one of the most intimate and one I would love to have, it would be like a bromance. I think that's one of the greatest relationships you'll kind of see, where you have a person kind of similar interest and similar wavelength, and just, it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's beautiful. I personally think so anyways. And for this I've talked mostly, I got super into romance, which I didn't mean to, I'm sorry. It's just all kinds of relationship gobbledygook. I don't know if you listened at all. I don't know if you're still here. I probably wouldn't be. It's really long. I'm so sorry. It's all over the place too. I wouldn't hold it against you. So I hope you have a fabulous Tuesday if you're still here. And I hope this didn't worsen it. And I hope it's good. I hope all is good with the world. I'm so tired. I'm so sorry. Goodbye.